Another viral TikTok, 8.5 million views, goes crazy, and yet something so much is still missing. And in today's video, we're going to be covering exactly what's discussed throughout this TikTok that had people buzzing for just a little while, and why relationship advice can't be this simple, and furthermore, see why views never equate to truth or the full story. All right, so as mentioned in the intro, this TikTok went crazy, 8.5 million views. And in the end, I'm going to share a couple thoughts on why relationships actually require more nuance than what's presented in this video. So let's take a look.
It's the simplest dating advice you'll ever need in your life, but most of you won't listen because you guys like to argue and complain about stupid that is very easy to understand. That person that has inconsistent communication with you just doesn't like you that much. That person that...
So let's stop right there. Okay, I like how she wrote this in, right? Most of y'all gonna argue and complain about stupid ish, but it's really this simple. So if this person has inconsistent communication with you, they just don't like you that much. Move on. I wish it was this simple. I really do. But I think that there's a lot of nuance and brevity that's missed here to actually make sense on why someone's inconsistent, why somebody isn't responding in a time frame you would appreciate it to be, you would like it to be. Because a lot of the times those inconsistent communications and conversations stem from somewhere. Like, people aren't just inconsistent for no reason. Now, of course, dependent on the reason they gives you the opportunity to choose. Is this somewhere I want to stay? Is this somewhere I want to continue to invest my time in? Or, man, maybe I just want to invest in something a little bit different. Maybe I want to go and find something different. And that's cool. That is okay. You good. I just want to be sure that there's room enough to get an understanding on why somebody is doing what they're doing, where they're coming from, in order to get the best perspective so you know the best decision to make. Someone being inconsistent in the communication that they offer you does not always equate to them not being interested in you. I know that that's a common thing that's said in social media, but it's just not true. Here's why. Because there are so many reasons why somebody is inconsistent. It is possible that this person is inconsistent because of the healthiness that you provide as you have continued or looked to build this relationship, and they're just not used to seeing it. Maybe there's some fear, some anxiety, worry. Oh, I don't know. This looks timid. This looks skeptical. I really don't know how to feel about this. Maybe this individual is reminded of certain things that have taken place in their life. It ticks off triggers, not because of who you are, but because of the healthy relationship and healthy space that's been created. And maybe they're just not used to it. Maybe they're not in a position where they feel they're able to receive what you're giving them. They don't know how to respond. They don't know how to communicate the best. Okay, I know that sounds so crazy, but there are so many people that have been programmed and come from backgrounds and certain environments as they grew up or as they've continued to walk through life, where it's like there's certain levels of communication that just doesn't seem necessary to them because they didn't see people who were before them do it. Maybe because they don't know how to really go about that and explain it the best. So sometimes they're here, sometimes they're not. It's possible. I know y'all really don't like this, but it's possible that some people are really just trying to figure out this movement of life, picking up jobs, starting their career, starting some things up, depending on where you're at in your dating space. And they're trying to figure some things out. So you gotta be willing to be understanding to know, like, hey, okay, if you just met them, if you just began a flow of relationship with them, maybe the expectation that you are their priority and they're your priority is too much. Maybe expecting them to respond back to you every 20 minutes, every hour, every day might be just a tad bit much. And it's not to say that expectation is wrong. It's not to say that desire is wrong, because if that is something that you encounter and that's not what you're looking for, then by all means, if you want somebody who's available right now, go get that. But part of that is knowing where you are. Part of that is knowing what you have the capacity for. Part of that is knowing where you're going. So when you encounter that, you're not mistaking anything, you're not playing around with anything, you're moving great with great intention and great direction, and everybody knows where you're going and where you're coming from. But sometimes I think that in a lot of these certain scenarios that are described, inconsistent communication looks like somebody texting you every 2 days. Or here that, they text you a couple days and they don't text you for 3. My question to you is, why does that offend you so much? Why does that bother you so much? And where do you get off on labeling that expectation on this person to where they ought to be responding to you on a day-to-day basis? Is this a new relationship? Is this something that has been going on for some time? Where are you at in this relationship to determine whether or not this is something that should be going on? Have you communicated that to this individual? Have you taken the time to sit down and ask this individual where they are and what they have the capacity for? Have you taken the time to ask, hey, I really enjoy talking to you. I really enjoy carrying conversation with you. It actually is a huge highlight of my days. And I would love to hear from you more. Is it impossible for us to maybe upkeep this conversation? Is it impossible for us to check in on one another more often, to hear from one another more often, putting it in a very respectable manner to where you actually are able to see what they're saying no to, what they're saying yes to, what they have room for? But I think a lot of this stuff, man, can happen and be subsided with communication. But instead, we hear things like this. Hey, if it's inconsistent, they just don't like you that much. That is not always the case. That is just not always the case. And we aren't putting ourselves in places to get an understanding. So guess what? It's going to cause you to kind of step out of your comfort zone a little bit. I know that you would love for everybody to read your mind and to just know what you want because they want it too. And I don't have to really explain nothing. But truth be told, when you start these relationships, when you encounter and embark on new relational journeys, repetition is required, equity is required. You're going to have to step out of your comfort zone to create something here. So I just want you to consider that maybe it's not because they don't like you. Maybe it's because they just are trying to figure life out and they just met you. Maybe they're nervous and anxious because the last time that they were here and they gave everything up front in terms of just being all in from jump instead of being patient and trying to see where things really are, they got their heart broke. So they're not trying to get hurt again. They're very cautious, very slow. I'm really not trying to go back to what I just overcame or even what I'm still trying to heal from, maybe. So I'm really not trying to get there too fast. So maybe more patience from you is required instead of just saying, oh, they're not texting me back fast enough. The communication is inconsistent. I just want you to get to a place where you're like, okay, why? Let me get an understanding of why the communication is inconsistent. And then based on the answers that I'm granted, as I dig, as I ask, as I move with curiosity, as I don't look to crush them and I don't look to judge them, but I'm just looking for understanding. I'm expressing where I am. Hey, I really enjoy talking to you. Is it impossible for us to really increase the amount of time that we spend speaking to one another? Is it impossible that we check in on each other throughout the day more? Is it impossible that we get on the phone once a week, that we are able to do see, those kinds of things actually put you in the best position to see, okay, this can actually work. We can work through this. I can work with this. And if you don't get any of those answers, they don't answer you, they don't care to give any kind of thoughts. Okay, you know what you have. But you don't know if all you do is just jump to that straightway conclusion, because that's not always the case. And I think you would be very surprised at how many people are skipped over and are missed out on simply because somebody was looking at their actions and instead of trying to get an understanding on why they acted that way, they left, and you possibly missed out on a gem, but you weren't willing to wait. You weren't really willing to investigate that, because I just think relationships are a lot more nuanced than maybe something as simple as that. So when it comes to rejection, I don't want you to look at that in a perspective that is as frightening as maybe it should be, because rejection is definitely a part of this game of life. And anytime that we're getting rejected, It's not always about us. It's not always about us. There are many people who get rejected not because of anything they didn't bring or that they did bring. It was just because that person just isn't in the position to receive it. They don't have the capacity for it. And I think that's just something to consider, right? Rejection does not have to be the end of your story and road. And in order to overcome rejection, I want you to get to a place of understanding that rejection isn't always about you. And if that person rejects you, that doesn't mean that you are no longer suitable for a relationship in your life. It's just not with that person. And there is somebody out here who would love to partake in this life with you. But you got to be willing to put yourself in the positions to build and grow and become the person you need to be in order to find her, in order to find him, in order to create that bond, because somebody's out here willing to do it. But if you let rejection become a wound that you identify with, that's how you'll introduce yourself. And then you limit even less prospects that you could potentially consider to date and create long-term relationships.
Person that ghosted you isn't a bad person. They just became uninterested or found someone else. Move on, find someone else to text you. If you're
Again, so blunt, yo, so blunt. And again, I respect that perspective. I just think there's more to it, right? If that person ghosted you, they're not a bad person. Just move on and find someone else to text you. I like that. Again, I think the nuance comes into play because it sometimes isn't as easy. I know we want it to be so easy, but think about the time and equity that you might have put into somebody before they ghosted you. I think there's a difference between talking to somebody for a couple days and they ghosted you versus talking to somebody for a few months and they ghosted you. Because a few months is definitely a lot longer of time than a few days. And it's dependent on what took place in those few months, right? Did y'all go on some dates? Y'all got in person, y'all hung out with one another, spent some time in person with some things, right? Of course, not trying to go into the route of having sex and those kinds of things, because I think that's out of place anyway. But depending on what was done in those spaces, just separating from somebody can be really hard in that. And I don't think we take that into consideration, right? I wish it was that easy for some people to just get up and go, but those ghostings are hurtful. I remember when I got ghosted. Uh, man, it's crazy. I got ghosted twice. I got ghosted twice. There was a girl back in like 2019. So I don't know when you're catching this video, but back in 2019, there was a female that had ghosted me, and I had no idea how to feel about that. And we had been communicating for months at that time. Just boom, just went off the face of the earth. There was another female, I think it was a little bit shortly after that, where I was told that I brought nothing to the table, that I was a simp, that I was doing too much, all those kinds of things. And she just left too, just out the blue, all these things that are random. But the time that I put into both of those spaces was enough time for some kind of emotional connection to be created to where when that happened, I felt some type of way. That hurt. That was not fun in any way, shape, or form. I dealt with thoughts like, man, I'm never going to be opening myself up again. I ain't never going to be vulnerable again. I ain't never going to do none of that because they don't care. I'm tired of giving and giving and giving, and don't nobody want to pour back into me. All those different thoughts and negative, draining, downward spirals that we walk into when those things happen. It happened to me too. It happened to me too. So ghosting isn't always something that is as simple as we'll just move on. There's some stumbling blocks that are presented in your mind because you're really trying to figure out, well, why did this happen? I thought things were going so well. And so now not only do I not know, not only has this ghosting happened, but I don't even know why it happened. I don't even have any kind of data to look back at and be able to say, okay, I can work on that so this doesn't happen again. It's not something that's so factual and logical, right? So a few things that I think is helpful to overcome ghosting, and at least something that helped me, was recognizing that there are some people that just don't have the capacity for what you're giving. And some people don't even know how to communicate how they feel. about you, about the situation. So what's easier? It's always easier. Let me just leave. Let me just back away. Let me just toss it up. And no, it's not fair to the individual who's getting ghosted. I'm just saying that there can be some room for us to get some understanding as to maybe why that happened and maybe be able to do something with it. And of course, it may not even always be in a manner of needing to get back in contact with that individual to figure it out. Because for me, I couldn't get back in contact. I was blocked on everything. And if you are interested in my background story, I said nothing wrong, did nothing wrong. And if I did, I definitely don't know it because I don't even have an opportunity to look back and ask questions and move in curiosity, right? And so it's one of those things where if you do get ghosted, it is hard to go back and get those questions, and you may never get that opportunity. But I'll say this: if you were all you were supposed to be, if you were all who you needed to be, which is yourself, authentic, vulnerable, honest, you moved in integrity, you did not lose your character, lose your way in doing all of that, and that is something that happened to you. I hardly believe, I strongly believe that you don't play as big of a role in that ghosting as maybe you are trying to credit yourself to. Now, it's different if you feel you were not moving in character and you were not moving in your authentic version of yourself. I think you might want to consider, oh, okay, maybe I wasn't even being myself there, right? And at that point, it actually may not even have as big of an effect on you because you realize I wasn't being my authentic self. But if you were being who you are, don't let somebody just ghosting you change that. That's just something that they don't want. That doesn't mean you're not wanted. Ooh, I felt that. Ooh. It just means that they didn't want it. It doesn't mean that you're not wanted. So be willing to make adjustments, not necessarily according to the person who ghosted you, but be able to say, man, even though that happened, I was who I am, who I'm supposed to be. I kept the character. I moved in integrity. I was loving. I was honest. I was vulnerable. I was authentic. I was genuine. I was moving in love here. And it was just something that maybe they weren't willing to receive for whatever reason, however many reasons. But I'm not going to allow that to stop me from experiencing the love that I desire to have and give with the relationship I'm pursuing. Somebody is going to want it. It just wasn't them. And maybe it's their loss. Maybe. But I just want you to consider that a lot of again, just as much as the rejection sometimes isn't about us, so are the ghostings. And it's hard because it happened to us. So we're like, well, it's got to be about us, right? Because like it happened to me. But I think that's the quickness to offense that we might jump to. And so we got to pull it back a little bit, Okay, was I who I was supposed to be? Was I authentic, loving in every way? Right? Okay, cool. So then maybe it's not about me. And now I'm able to kind of recover from it a little bit better. And it can be still timid to step back out into that space, but we don't want to move with a wound of fear as we're moving forward. And so again, yes, as much as I can agree that, hey, that just person, that doesn't mean they're a bad person, they just don't want to talk to you no more. I agree with that. That does not mean that they're a bad person. We don't want to label them as a bad person. And in order to deal with the effects that were caused by the ghosting, some reflection, some journaling, some understanding of our thoughts and emotions and where they're popping up and coming from. Those things are just as important as we're stepping forward and potentially putting ourselves back in position to find someone new and build a connection and relationship with them. So I get that. And there's just a little bit more nuance to it. Just a little bit more, 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 just a little bit more. I wish it were that simple. Let's keep it looking.
Your partner cheated on you, leave them. And if you don't leave them, which most of you won't because most of you lack standards and self-respect.
You see how she did that again? Which most of you won't because you lack standards and self-respect. I like the bluntness and I like it's reeling you in. She she just reeling you in, keeping you in a little longer.
Shut up about it, stop hanging it over their head, and learn how to work through it together. Or else, move on. If a man
Yeah. So again, cheating, I won't say again, but I'll say this. This might be a hot take. Ooh, y'all might not like this. The question that I have for her is, what is she defining as cheating? Okay. How do we define cheating? And to that extent, right, what's the context of the relationship that we're picturing when we say this that gives us room to label somebody who remains as weak and has lack of self-respect and standards for themselves? I think that is an important question to ask. Here's why. Because there are some relationships that, yes, infidelity has come into play, unfortunately, and this is not to give room to unfaithfulness. Okay. That is whack. That is not the move. It is so dishonorable. And it is a really, really whack move. Oh, it's terrible. 1000%. And let's look at the context of the relationship. If somebody was unfaithful after maybe 10 years of commitment where there was no sign, potentially, I guess it's hard for me to say no sign, but at least there was no worry of it, right? Commitment, all that was happening. And then this situation pops up. Now I'm looking at the equity that's placed in the relationship. I'm looking at how long and how much we've invested into one another. I'm considering the context and the reasoning why behind the infidelity that took place. That then gives me room to, again, make the decision. Do I stay or do I leave? And I'm not weak for doing either, especially if I get an understanding of where this person has come from and how are they communicating this? Because if they're moving in a manner where they're being manipulative and they're trying to make you out to be the problem, and you're why they cheat, yeah, you need to leave that. Heck no, I don't got time for that. You don't even want to take accountability for it, man. You better go on somewhere with all that. But here's the thing. That's context, because for somebody who would take accountability for it and then say, man, I want to work on this because I don't want this to happen again. Somebody who's willing to reconcile with that, that's a different way you could approach that. And maybe you do choose to stay. That doesn't make you weak because you chose to stay in that moment. And we understand that by staying in that moment, as she mentioned, if you do stay, you don't hold it over their head, right? You don't whoop them with it. You don't guilt trip them with it in order to get what you want and make them feel bad and make them feel what you felt and all those kinds of things. We move in a space where we are loving and reconcilable with this, and we don't hang it over their heads. You willingly build up that trust again, because it's going to need some work. Baby steps again. That's just where we're at. But I wouldn't necessarily go as far as to say that they're weak and they have no standards and self-respect. I just think there's context to it. Now, again, on the flip side, if the context is it's repetitive, yeah, why do you stay? Right. So then we have to raise questions on, what do you believe about yourself? Do you believe that you're no longer able to get something, a relationship again, a marriage again, a connection again? Do you believe that this is the only person out here for you that is able to at least appear to hold you down? Because they're not being honorable to you in this moment, because it's a repetitive thing. They continuously put you in this cycle of abuse where they're just continuously manipulating you and turning their back on you and remaining unfaithful to you. Like, we do have to do something about that. And of course, first course of action is to leave. But my question is, what are we defining as cheating? If you ask me, right, in dealing with this question, I actually turn to Matthew chapter 5, verse 27. We have it and we keep it biblical worldview around here. If you look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 27, this is the context of the Sermon on the Mount, and we're dealing with Jesus addressing adultery. I'm going to read these two verses. Verse 27, Matthew chapter 5, New International Version reads this: "You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." So in a lot of ways, what is implied is that this adultery was first committed in the heart before it was ever surfaced through physical actions. So cheating isn't just you slept with someone outside of the relationship. It's not just you kissed somebody outside the relationship. because there's so much more than just the physical that is granted only to the exclusivity of the relationship you're creating and connecting with someone. And it's first emotional before it results physical. And if we really look at this verse, I just want to ask you, you don't gotta type it in the comment. You don't gotta let me know. How many people have you looked on lustfully? Like you just looked at them and it was a thought of sex in your mind with them. Lust. So it doesn't even have to get to a place, according to scripture, of a physical decision in order for it to be considered cheating. So there's a lot of room here when we're considering emotional connections, emotional ties, spiritual ties. Like it's a lot there. It's a lot there. But my question is, what do you consider cheating in this space? And then what's the context of the relationship? And if you choose to stay, if it's a one-time offense, it just seems something that was just so out of the normal. This is not like them. Something's going on. Like you have an opportunity to reconcile that. And that is something that is forgivable. It is. But I am not one to tell you that you must stay, because I don't think it's a requirement to stay. I would tell you that depending on the context, the understanding that you gather, you have the opportunity as the offended of this space to leave. You don't got to stay with that. You have the opportunity presented to you to leave. I just think that there might be cause to pause before, especially if it's in the space of marriage. Now, I'm not married, but I do and am aware of a lot of processes of divorce proceedings, how those things work, how painful and exhausting it is of a process. Not only learning about it, but like seeing other people go through it. It's tough. And so, especially if it's in a marital covenant, and this was a one-time event, I know that that's going to hurt your pride and it's going to hurt you a lot, man. So I can't, again, I'm not going to try to speak a whole lot to it. I just think that being in that situation is a whole lot different than what I would even share. But I just think that there can be room to consider, now, if this happened in the dating space, man, I mean, there is also more to consider there too, because if they're doing it here, like, can I really trust you that you won't do it there? Like if this were to get to a covenantal space, I think that's a huge sign that you look at and you note, and you ought not to be ashamed if you leave and if you stay, or I guess again, if there's something there that makes sense to reconcile it, and you guys get an understanding on that, I mean, that's completely your decision, but it's something to keep note of, really. I mean, especially in the dating space, because you're not even in a covenant marriage, and this is something that's occurred. So again, I'm not mad at her, and this ain't coming and attacking her or anything of that sort. I think what she said there is very, very valid. Just nuance, because I don't think that every case where infidelity is present is always irreconcilable. There are so many marriages that have lasted and stood a test like infidelity. And there are also marriages that have ended due to infidelity. So I do think that in order for you to be sure that this is something that isn't a reoccurrence in your life, and you don't encounter somebody who resembles shades and characteristics of potentially moving in that space, well, one, we got to get our hearts aligned in the foundation of Christ and cling close to him. And then two, be willing to continue to become the right person in order to attract that right person who's going to honor you, love you, respect you, uplift you, and lead you. But just some thoughts, because I do think nuance is potentially required in this space. And I know that's not something that you want, and you wish it was so cookie cutter simple and it's either this or that. But man, a lot of the black and white, descriptions that we give to relationship spaces is actually what has us hurt in a lot of ways and missing out in a lot of ways, and, losing sight of a lot of things, So I just think that sometimes it's nuanced, and we have to ask ourselves, what do we consider to be cheating? And then what is the context of the relationship that we're saying to somebody, you're weak and lack of self-respect if you stay? What's the context? Because I don't think that we could apply such a description to somebody if the cheating was a one-time offense. Now, should it have happened at all? No. But a one-time offense where that individual did it, was very remorseful of it, the reconciling was put into progress, and they never did it again. Why are they considered weak for staying? Why do they not have self-respect if they stayed? You know, I think that's an entirely different picture than somebody who's repetitively being cheated on. Because then we would raise questions like that, you know. But then again, there's also paradigms and programs of that individual who looks at that situation and says, I need to stay. And there might be fears about that individual where they're like, bro, I just haven't been single in so long. I'm afraid to go back there. I don't know what it's like to be on my own anymore. I've spent more of my life with this person than without them. So I have no idea what that looks like. Yeah, like those are things to consider, yo, before we just start labeling somebody as weak and lack of self-respect. And you know, that's I guess her content, how she wants to put it. Okay. I just think there's more to consider, man. That inquires a stronger process of dealing with separating from somebody, uncoupling from somebody, because there's a whole lot that's invested there. And for all of that to be betrayed off of one action hurts. And that person can't, you know, it's not as simple as just get up and move on. There's a process that and some healing that has to go on through there a lot of times. And I think we can easily ignore that when we just tell people get up and go on.
Man does not want to pay all your bills and wants to go 50-50. That doesn't make him a bum. That doesn't make him a bad guy. That doesn't make him a little boy. He's still a man, just a man with different interests and goals in life. Go find you someone who will. There's 8 billion people in the world. I promise you can find one. That woman that wants all her bills paid doesn't make her a gold digger, doesn't make her a slut. Just go find you one that could do 50-50 with you. It's very simple. She just doesn't want what you want, and that's okay.
Yeah, different preferences does not make them any less of a human. Does not mean that they're a bum or that they got to get called out of the name. I get that. I get that for sure. Now, again, just because 8.5 million people plus saw this, me being one of them, and because I know how much this could potentially come off in, of course, social media circles and clips and things like that, let me say this. If you're expecting someone to pay all your bills and you're only dating them and you're not in a covenant marriage with them, we do have to adjust our standards a bit. I do think that that's pretty ludicrous to expect somebody who you're only dating and not making a commitment to marry or already in marriage to say, hey, yeah, I need you to pay my bills. I think that's crazy. Now, I don't think that's what she is saying, so I don't want to put that in her mouth in any way. I don't want to put those words in her mouth. I just think that's something that comes across my mind as I hear that, because there's somebody might look at that and go, oh, okay, so cool. Like if I'm in the dating process, I can expect this person that I just said I want to date exclusively to pay my bills. But it's like, wait a minute, you know, I don't think that's I don't think that's okay. If you ask me, that is more so of, hey, we are now two becoming one in marriage, right? Where my money is your money's my money, your bills are my bills are your bills. See that kind of thing. Yeah, I think that's more so where that happens. But that is not to dismiss the necessity of a conversation like that. I think if that is a conversation that's necessary to have as you're dating and trying to figure out who you want to spend the rest of your life with, that is something to consider. And this is the last thing I'll say on this. There is definitely more to people than how they want to do their finances. Okay. So I don't think that we should ever come into a situation and determine a relationship based on their financial stability or positioning in that moment. Your expectations just have to be monitored. Like, because I do think there are a lot of people who carry these high expectations when it comes to finances and positionings that just aren't real. And it's all filtered through what social media is feeding you. And she'll actually cover this in one of the last things we'll look at. Like social media will feed you that this is what it's supposed to look like. And so you begin to look for it. And ah, it's not really all that. So I think there's so much more about an individual before we get to the financial stability. And of course, as you are making the decision in your dating process, who you want to give a shot to marry and pursue to marry, because that's the purpose of dating. And if you're dating for anything less as a believer specifically, I don't know what you're doing, but that's another conversation for another day. As you're in that process and these conversations do come up, you be authentic, you be real, what you're looking for, and things of that sort. So I'm not saying dismiss it. I am just saying, however, that there is more. There is more.
You cannot attract the type of person you want if you are also not the person that they want.
Bada blam. Bada blam. Oh man. Okay. Yeah, she cooking now. Yeah, she cooking now. She cooking.
Get off the couch if you want a gym rat.
Okay.
Open up a book if you want someone to
All
read books a
right.
lot. It's very simple. Men aren't your standards are. You attract what you are. So maybe it's time to do some self-reflection.
Okay. So I think that might be the last one. We might look at one more, but now it looks like she's kind of cooking. She's kind of cooking a little bit. And she goes on for like 2 minutes. So I'm not necessarily going to react to the whole entire video. If you guys want to watch the whole video, I'll drop it in the link below. Because she does kind of get into some things that I'm just not in a position to give extremely insightful thoughts on. And so I don't want to offer those things to you. But in terms of where we're at right now in the video, two things that she mentioned. Okay. Men aren't boo-boo. Your standards are. You are what you are, attract. And it kind of goes both hands with what she said in the first one. I think all of that is true. You are what you are, attract. You are what you attract. Right. And you have to be willing to put yourself in the lane of what you're attracted to, because they're going to want similar things that you're interested in them about. Right. And so hear me when I say this as well. A part of the nuance, I am not suggesting to you that you force yourself to be what somebody else likes that causes you to step out of your values and your foundation in order to have it. Because anytime that you sacrifice your values and foundation in order to have somebody in your life, that is somebody you don't need in your life. And you're losing a lot more than you will ever gain teaming up with that person. So you just need to leave that alone. What we're saying in this, what I am saying in this, and maybe to a degree what this young lady is sharing here is, you got to be willing to be presentable in a lot of the stuff that you're looking for. If you want to be with somebody who's fit and in the gym, then hey, you need to get in the gym yourself, because I'm sure that person is going to be looking for that themselves. If you want somebody who's God-fearing and has a heart for Jesus and loves serving in their community, hey buddy, my good friend, yeah, we got to get into some community. We got to get into church communities. We got to be willing to be servant and continue to grow into being the person that Christ has called us to be, and living by the Bible, living a biblical life. We want to do that, right? And so I love all of that. I think that's very fair. And then the second one, yeah, I've shared before, and it ruffles feathers. It is not something that is so quick to do, especially again in the nuances of it being repetitive. You have to be willing to look at yourself and say, man, what is it about me that's giving room to this person to say, hey, I want to come into your life? Setting your temperature. We talk about it pretty often around here. Setting your temperature, right? I am allowing, specifically as a believer, Christ to set my temperature, to set the character and standard that I am called to live by, regardless of what happens to me. So if it's reciprocated or not reciprocated, it doesn't change who I am. Right? It doesn't change who I am. And so with setting your temperature, and you are what you attract, you have to look at the temperature you've set. What am I giving to this individual? How am I presenting myself? How am I going about the way that I live, what I post, what I share? What is it about me that is giving this person room to feel that they can just come up to me and do me like this? Right? And maybe you don't have time to go into the nuances of how they think, but you know where you are and you know what kind of energy you're giving off. And so maybe you need to reconsider. Right. And I don't think you have room to complain if you're unwilling to reconsider. Right. And so I just think that's something to consider. In order to find the right woman, you need to be the right man. In order to find the right man, you need to be the right woman. So what does that entail? Well, I need to find my values. I need to find my faith system. I need to understand and rest and cultivate my life around that. There are three things that I want to give you. If you're a single individual and you're thinking you're ready for a relationship, these are three things I want to share with you, right? And nuances, hit me up about them. I can help you through it. Relationship with the creator, relationship with your calling, and a relationship with capacity. Those three things are things that you need in order to feel most prepared to embark on a journey for a romantic relationship that leads you to a place of marriage and beyond. And without that, it's going to be tough, mighty tough, more tough than you realize. So this is about all that we're going to react to this video. I am going to share this last thought with you guys. Really, I'm going to share this last thought with you guys. And it's just understanding these few things. Relationships are more nuanced than we think. And they're more nuanced than we think because in a lot of ways, human beings are complex. We can't make simple suggestions to people and advice to people when we are complex humans. It's not so simple to just get up and leave and move on from certain things, especially when you've invested equity and time and attention and things like that into certain spaces. We got to be willing to move with understanding and come to a place where we can confidently say that this is where I'm at, this is where I'm going, and this is the direction of the journey that I need to take to get there. And sometimes those healing journeys are required. And it's not so simple to just get up and move on. And it's not so simple that people are just not interested in you and they don't like you. Like, no, man, there's just a lot of nuance. Proverbs 4, verse 7 has been the verse of the year for me. It says, wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom. And with all you're getting, get an understanding. It's been one of the year verses of the year for me. When we get an understanding, we get clarity. And we don't have to move from places of assumption in order to suit and cope with the emotions we're feeling. And sometimes at the cost of getting that understanding, it's tough. And so you navigate that. That's where wisdom comes in, right? You have the opportunity to navigate that. Man, is this something that I really want to know? You know, do I really have the capacity to really know the truth about this situation? Because if I don't, I probably shouldn't go after it. You know, I probably shouldn't put myself in a loop where I'm going to keep getting crushed. And man, if you just really believe that it's something that's on your heart and you need some understanding and it's available to go get, okay, like you still have connection with this person, you can ask them. It wasn't something that ended really terrible or nasty, and that person just cut you off from everything. Like if you have access to that and you know you can go get that, I wouldn't. Maybe that's something that you should do. It's something to consider. I'm not saying you have to. It's just something to consider. But we got to get to a place where we're willing to get an understanding about why people do what they do, because it's not so simple. It's just not so simple. Relationships are not that simple. They're just not. And when we continue to move as if they are, this is how we end up where we are. And we're still confused, trying to figure out why we feel the way we do and why things are the way they are. And we quickly play the blame game, and we quickly just get to places that we don't want to be. And we start identifying with wounds because I just thought it was this simple. I thought it was this easy. There's a lot of point number 2, equity that needs to be placed in relationships. There's time and attention that you need to invest in for relationships to be what they can be. And it's hard work. And you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone and put yourself in places that you may have thought you didn't or weren't going to do in order to get the most out of relationships, to be vulnerable, honest, and transparent, to create deep interactions, conversations, and meaningful relationships with people. You're going to have to be willing to step into some spaces and doing it afraid, not giving all of yourself to them, not telling them all your deepest secrets and deepest thoughts, but being willing to put yourself in a place where you can trust them with a little and see what they do with a little in order to be able to determine if you can trust them with much. I really do wish it was this simple. I do, but it's not. And equity is one of those things that are necessary. Repetition is one of those things that are necessary in order to get the most out of the relationships you desire to carry. Get some understanding. I think it goes a long way. And that is where the nuance of relationships is necessary and why nuance is more important, because it's just more to the story. And there are certain things about you that people are wanting to learn and get to know that takes time spent with you in order to learn and know. So when you think of it in that way, okay, yeah, I would want somebody to give me the time and effort, you know, to work through some things and journey with through some things. So like, Why am I so unwilling to do that for other people? Because if you ask me, that's where a lot of the genuine relationships and connections go and boil down to. Somebody who said, I'm willing to commit to understand you and journey in this life with you. So that's it. That's all I got. All the thoughts that I have on this reaction. Again, if you want to watch the full video, it's down in the description below to kind of get the rest of the thoughts that she shared. Listen, if you're new, subscribe, turn on the post notifications so you'll know the next time we're posting over here. Like this video, share with a friend. Let me know in the comment section. If there's any other videos that you find that you would love for me to react to, send them my way, DM them to me on my socials, which are also linked in the description for you. And we'll continue putting some of these out and giving some thoughts and perspectives to them. All right. So your boy appreciates you oh so much. And until our next conversation, be easy and be breezy, my friend. Hey, peace.